Okay, so I'm here to talk about cybersecurity, and you're all thinking he's going to stand up and put a slide all about the growth of malware. Well, I don't want to disappoint you. But the reality is this only tells part of the story, because the cybersecurity industry is really an outlier of the technology industry. I mean, the reality is I came in here today, and I don't know anybody at all. And in part because cybersecurity is being seen as very much an outlier to the tech industry. But the reality is that it's the single most important thing that we all do. It impacts every part of our lives. And we saw some of that just 2 years ago with the WannaCry attacks. And those of you that were unfortunate enough to be in a hospital would have realized that actually it impacts our everyday lives. But I know that message doesn't necessarily resonate to the fintech world. I could stand up here and talk to you about the financial cost of cybercrime, which, by the way, is significant. In fact, today, what we're witnessing and what we're seeing are headlines such as these. Nation states are using cyber as a means to boost their own economic value. These particular attacks themselves have been attributed to a nation who actually, as far back as 2013, had been identified as investing in cyber as a means to offensively conduct warfare activities because they have non-repudiation. Because, quite frankly, it's cheaper. $60 million out of the Bank of Taiwan, Bank of Bangladesh, all of these various different banks have been compromised by nations going out and stealing tens of millions of dollars. And of course, the macro impact of all of that is that it impacts the GDP for entire nations. Now, this particular study was done by CSIS, and they calculated the economic impact of cybercrime. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm not going to move to Germany because it has the highest losses associated with cybercrime. But the reason it has the highest is because it's the country that has the most mature reporting capabilities. A 1.6% of GDP for Germany alone. And I would argue it's probably the same in the UK as well. Our failure to address these issues is impacting your growth and is impacting your bottom line. And quite frankly, we had the Chancellor up earlier. It is deterring investment into this country. Because quite frankly, globally, we just aren't doing well enough. And what would we say is driving this? I remember we started to do a research paper on Bitcoin, and I started it in September 2013. Now, anybody remember the price of Bitcoin in September 2013? It was a cent. 1 single cent. And less than 4 years from that initial price, we were talking about a $20,000 asset. So for those of you that were fortunate enough to invest at that point, congratulations. But for everybody else, we all try to jump upon this train. And what we see and what we witness today is, much like the tulips were in the Netherlands a couple of hundred years ago, this is what the crypto world has become. There's been this wild push towards investing into cryptocurrencies. And you can go onto YouTube, and there are people out there that will give you the 11 ways to earn money with Bitcoin. And honestly, that's one of thousands and thousands of videos. This has become the biggest gold rush that I can think of in the tech world today. But what happens as a result of that? When we have this great asset which is growing at 20,000%, we're going to see people try to profit from that. Now, I call this the Ryan Gosling syndrome. That is, by the way, Ryan Gosling and not Kevin Bellinger. Now, what happened was, in this particular instance, there was an initial coin offering. There was a cryptocurrency. And on their website, they had the list of the team. And this was their graphic designer. This was the individual working for the cryptocurrency. Now, I'm pretty sure that this was fake. I'm pretty sure. But if you had a team and one of the graphic designers was Ryan Gosling, you wouldn't anticipate this particular investment to make any money, would you? I mean, if you do your due diligence today, that would be a red flag. And yet this cryptocurrency made $830,000. Because we have to move faster in the world of crypto, because if you don't, the price is going to go up. And so due diligence is being thrown out of the window for the promise of these high net returns. And the result of this is what we're witnessing and what we're seeing is large numbers of cryptocurrencies, which quite frankly are scams. There's actually a website that I took this from, and I did a list of all of the dead currencies out there. And I'm only displaying one of 50 out of 1,579 cryptocurrencies which are fake. And some of them are just ridiculous. Honestly, my 11-year-old daughter can identify that they're a scam, and yet people are investing. This is the Wild West, and there is absolutely no regulation, no oversight. And the net result is people are losing significant sums of money. You know, from the macro perspective, just last year, almost $1 billion was lost through exit scams and phony ICOs. And I love that tweet there. It's hard to tell in crypto if it's a scam or just awful business decisions. But that's the reality of the world that we live in. In the fintech world, and specifically associated with the crypto world, you really have no clue about if you're going to actually get any return at all. And it's only getting worse. As you can see, in the first half of 2018, the amount of money that's being stolen from legitimate exchanges is growing up. And so you've got this issue whereby you've got cryptocurrencies themselves, which in themselves may be fraudulent. And if you're fortunate enough to identify a cryptocurrency that isn't fraudulent, and you put your money in an online wallet at an exchange, you have to hope that that isn't one of the exchanges that's being targeted. Because 3 times as many are being targeted today than they were last year. Now, it's quite a frightening message, but that's the world that we live in, and I think we have to open our eyes to the fact that as we as the tech industry begin to move into these highly profitable areas, so does the adversary. And in this case, we're not just talking about crime, because nation states are now getting engaged and are now making money through these particular platforms as well. This is actually a real message taken from a Reddit post. Now, I've gone quite quickly for the sole purpose that I wanted to spend a few minutes here. You know, when we talk about these large numbers, $725 million, or I talked about the impact to the German GDP of 1.6%. When we read these headlines of the Bank of Taiwan losing 60 million, or the Bank of Bangladesh, which was potentially more, we lose sight of what's actually happening. Because when these particular schemes come up, they go out for investment. In fact, for many of you, you go out and you seek angel investment. Maybe you go to friends, maybe you go to family. And for those of us that may be in a fortunate position to invest, it can seem quite attractive. I mean, of course, you use Bitcoin as the key example of this, the poster child for financial success in this world. It used to be 1 cent, and then it went to $20,000. I mean, why wouldn't you want to invest in a scheme like that? And yet, the reality of what actually happens is people like that. Individuals that genuinely don't really understand the world of crypto. I mean, I remember I was in an Uber just a couple of weeks back, and I told the individual I work in cybersecurity, and he said, which cryptocurrency should I invest in? And that was the extent of this Uber driver's due diligence in investment, just asking his passenger where he should put all of his family's investment. He didn't really understand it. I didn't even ask him about blockchain or 51% attacks because I thought that would be rude. But the reality is that I say normal people, but the general population are being duped into investments in these particular schemes. And the net result is they're losing their family savings. Now, a completely ridiculous and an alternate example I could give you is you look at the likes of Ashley Madison. When that breach occurred, it impacted real people's lives. Now, Philip Hammond earlier talked about Brexit, and it seems every presentation I talk about has some Brexit component associated with it. And for those of you that woke up the next morning after the Brexit vote, if you're anything like me, you kind of wandered around in a daze asking yourself, how did I get it so wrong? Did I truly misunderstand the underlying resentment that people had? And for the next couple of months, I began to question whether I really understood the general population's feelings about the European Union. And all of a sudden, we began to realize that actually the likelihood is that that particular vote was manipulated and targeted through concepts like social media to sway the vote. And you'll see that, by the way. In a few weeks' time, you'll see research coming out associated with the European parliamentary elections, where nation states have taken an active role to manipulate the upcoming vote for the parliamentary elections in May. But what if we can use social media to manipulate investments? What if we can try to convince people, maybe what you should do is put your money in this particular cryptocurrency or this particular fintech startup? And in fact, there's research that's been done today that actually has shown specific pump and dump schemes using social media as the vehicle to drive investment. By the way, I'm not advising any fintech startup to try to do a pump and dump scheme, but the reality is that we are now being influenced through multitude of various different vectors. It's not. I remember when I bought my first shares and I was reading the forums and stuff to try to get investment advice. Now people are going on Twitter, they're following certain individuals, and they're tracking YouTube videos as their means to identify which cryptocurrencies or which investments to go after. And the reality is it's been shown that these particular schemes are being manipulated as well. I'm going to move on from that, actually. And of course, we're faced in this world whereby criminals, nation states, shady investors all operate in this particular world. The net result of all of this is the number of exchanges being targeted is increasing. The amount of malware targeting investor systems to be able to manipulate online wallets or offline wallets is increasing. The amount of money being lost out of this industry, out of your pockets, is increasing. I always try to leave with a kind of cheery note, and it's very difficult in my particular line of work. But I think fundamentally, there's an opportunity for everybody here. There's a wealth of advice out there. I just did a quick search on Google about cryptocurrency investment advice, and I was completely swamped. But the reality is that we have to make decisions quicker because for fear of losing out on the opportunity. Our return on investments have to be potentially higher and bigger than they actually are. But I think your opportunity today is to be able to go out and articulate and demonstrate how you can provide accurate and real levels of return beyond what the shady investors are offering today as well. I think your opportunity today is to demonstrate and articulate how you've actually got a phenomenal working group and a phenomenal management team, not Ryan Gosling. I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for your time.